Welcome to Your Family Bank podcast, where we talk about your legacy and how to pass on more than money. Today's guest is Parag Amin. He is an attorney that specializes in business litigation, business disputes. And so, since a lot of the times we talk about family businesses and how that gets passed on, we're gonna be able to pick his brain about what not to do, so that way your kids or you and your kids don't fight about the family business. But Parag, thanks for being on.
My pleasure, Blake. Thank you.
So start off, give us a little bit of your background, kind of how you got into the field that you're in, and how we got here.
Yeah, so the origin story is I was born in New York. My parents immigrated to the United States from India in search of the American dream, just looking for a better future. And so my dad had this dream of being an entrepreneur one day. So he took his life savings and he moved my whole family from New York to Florida. And him and my mom were working like 80, 90, 100-hour weeks during that time. I spent most of my time with my grandmother, my dad's mom, while my parents were working to try to make this store successful. And Blake, those were the days when you could smoke indoors, and there were some pool tables, and they served alcohol on premises. So my parents didn't really want me around that. So I didn't really get to see them very much because it was long hours. And by the time they got home, I'd usually be asleep. So anyways, my dad finds out after over 2 years of working all these hours that he owed over $200,000 in unpaid sales taxes. And what he didn't know is that even though he had paid his taxes when he bought the entity, meaning the company that owned the store, he hadn't formed a new entity, hadn't structured it the way he really should have. And ultimately, unfortunately, he had inherited that undisclosed liability. So he could have sued. Unfortunately, he just didn't have that guidance. And ultimately, they gave him the ultimatum. The taxing authority told him, look, you can either one, pay it, or two, shut it down because you own the entity now. And so the way we see it, you owe the money and you can figure out the other issues with the old owner. So unfortunately, my dad ended up bouncing around for a little while, trying to find his footing after losing his life savings, and then ultimately went back to a W-2 factory job at the same company that he had left to try to go make his entrepreneurial dreams a reality. So I learned at a pretty young age that that's something that I didn't want to happen to somebody else. I certainly didn't want it to happen to my family or to other people. And that's what led me down the path of going on to law school and then starting my own firm where we help business owners avoid the kinds of problems that can destroy their business, their livelihood, and their legacy.
Wow. Yeah, it's a fascinating business story. Unfortunately, it's all too common. People who either get the bad advice or don't get any advice, and they don't go through that process of actually hiring an attorney because they think, oh, I can do it without it. It's not going to be, they're going to be too expensive, all those things. And as you and I know, ounce of prevention makes up so much more than what you'd spend if you just spend a little bit with an attorney before, and you're going to save yourself a ton of money down the road.
100%. Yeah. A good attorney will pay multiples in terms of how much you end up saving.
Well, before we dive into a little bit more detail on stuff, I always like to pause and get some interesting fact, something unique about our guests that most people wouldn't know about you.
Something that most people wouldn't know. I was born left-handed. I'm naturally a lefty, but in Indian culture, being left-handed is kind of viewed as being improper, and so I was forced to switch to being right-handed. So now I write right-handed, but a number of sports I play left-handed, like tennis, I play left-handed, baseball, I play left-handed. So kind of a crossover.
Oh, that's interesting. My grandpa, he was left-handed, and the most interesting thing when he would play golf is he would drive and hit all of his iron shots left-handed, but he would putt right-handed.
Interesting.
So he had both sets of clubs in the bag, kind of. So pretty interesting watching someone do that.
Yeah, that's an interesting club set to put together.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's talk about you. You've already kind of shared, something you learned as a kid. Was there something specific as a kid around money that kind of framed your view of how you saw money, or made you kind of say, I'm not going to handle money that way. I don't want to think about it that way, for good or bad, that kind of shaped your view?
Yeah, money was scarce growing up for me. I grew up lower middle class, and so I grew up in Maryland, and I still remember it to this day. Like, so during the winters, we just didn't have that much, and so to go to sleep, it would be freezing cold outside. You'd be talking about like 10, 20, 30 degrees outside, and to try to stay warm because the heat wouldn't be on, I'd have a beanie on my head. I'd be wearing like a shirt with a sweatshirt and sweatpants, and it would just be freezing. And I remember like not wanting to necessarily come home from school because I knew it was going to be cold. At least it was warm in school. I didn't particularly enjoy school, but it was warm there. So that was kind of the mindset around money growing up, that it's scarce, it's hard to get, um, and and so there's a lot of work that had to go into changing that mindset, and in a way, growing up.
So what was that work? What were the steps, or was there a mentor along the way that kind of helped you with changing that mindset?
Man, there was a number of books, a number of mentors. I mean, ones that stick out, for example, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, as an example. Uh, Jim Rohn, I started listening to him because as a friend turned me on to him, and I thought his stuff was great. I've listened to Tony Robbins, and there's a number of mentors who helped me along the way to get me to where I am. I mean, there's a lot of people who have helped me, whether big or small, along the way to get to where I'm at now.
So that's, a typical story of someone who's become successful. They struggled. They came from a background where it was really hard. So you had to work at it. You had to go learn, be resourceful, do all of those things. Now that you are, how do you make it so that your kids still learn those skills, learn those things without having to go through the struggles that you do?
I love that question. It's interesting because I think there's a balance to both. Meaning, I try to make sure that my daughter doesn't necessarily feel that way about money, but that she also understands and respects where it comes from. The fact that you got to work hard at it, that you have to be great at whatever it is you're doing and provide service and value to people in exchange for getting money. That she really understands that you really want to provide a service that's in excess of what somebody's paying you to provide value. That's a good level of exchange. So I've been balancing those things between her feeling as if money is somehow scarce, which it's not on planet Earth. It certainly isn't. They print more money every day. So it is an infinite resource, unlike most resources. But from a perspective of also, I think finding that balance and understanding and healthy respect of work and dedication and discipline to be able to get it.
Yeah, it's easier said than done, for sure. Because we don't want our kids to have to suffer, in the same ways we did. Like, I'm sure you don't want her to feel cold when she goes to bed at night, but that shaped you, and that had a big role in how hard you wanted to work and how determined you were. And so that's the questions we're asking, is like, okay, from this podcast, what can we learn? Because we want our kids to be successful and learn the things that we learned, but not necessarily in the same way that we learned them, without as much struggle or whatever. And so, I don't think there's a right answer. I don't know that we can necessarily get it exactly right, but we can create and foster environments that make that happen. So I appreciate you sharing that. So now I want to get into your expertise. What are the mistakes people make, especially with family businesses, that cause fights, that cause the division, and make it so that either the business doesn't exist anymore, or that the family just never talks to each other again?
So I have dealt with a number of family business disputes, partnership disputes, ownership disputes, from everything from blue collar industries to doctors. And a common thread or theme is that a lot of times they haven't thought things through or talked things through with each other. And I think a part of it is this false sense of security of, well, at the end of the day, we're all family and we'll be able to figure it out. And so I think that unfortunately leads to some bad habits and oversights oversights over things that you would normally discuss. If you were getting into a business deal with a third party, like you and I have never met, we're going to do some due diligence on each other. What kind of business experience do you have? Have they been successful? Have your ventures been unsuccessful? What are your skill sets? And unfortunately, I think a lot of that due diligence kind of just gets swept under the rug or overlooked because it's enough that they're your brother, your sister, or your cousin. But unfortunately, then that also means that a lot of formal structures are not in place. There isn't delegation of duties. There's no formal operating agreement or sometimes even a formal entity. And that can create huge problems down the road, particularly when your lives diverge and you each start to have families, or there's other kinds of friction or bumps in the road. All of a sudden, those things that you overlooked or didn't talk about earlier suddenly become huge and many times insurmountable for problems that unfortunately destroy the business.
Yeah, and it's only a problem if the company's worth something. When if it's worth nothing, then there's nothing to fight over.
Yeah,
So
right.
there's usually, it's when it becomes successful, people realize, oh, well, I want more of this, or they're getting more than I am, or whatever it is, or they may not be contributing. So theme I'm hearing is communication. They're not willing to talk about and have those hard conversations. And I think that goes for any business. You're starting with your friend or whatever. Most people are like, oh, we're good. Like, he's my best friend. He's my brother. He's whatever. So how would someone approach bringing that up? Because, the other person may be like, hey, we're good. Like, I'm your brother. I'm your sister. We're fine. Like, we don't need to talk about that. What are some key things that they can do to help kind of bridge or start that conversation?
Well, I think there's an aspect of acknowledging the fact that you're good and just saying, yeah, I agree with you. We are good. And I just want to make sure that we remain good. And in that realm, I think it's important for us to have some sort of formal operating structure because it goes both ways. It helps me clarify what I can expect from you, and it also clarifies for you what you can expect from me. So there's an aspect of just being able to document it because problems are way easier to solve while they're still hypothetical problems rather than actual problems. So how do we avoid these problems altogether and just solve them on paper while they're still hypothetical problems and before they become actual problems? Because it's a lot more time consuming, a lot more expensive to resolve actual problems than hypothetical ones.
Yeah, when you're on the same page, then let's have a talk about it when everybody's still happy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same thing in an estate planning perspective. A lot of times the parents don't want to tell the kids what their plan is or what's going on, and then they pass away. There's no one to have that conversation with now, and so they're fighting with their siblings over what they think is right, as opposed to having a discussion with mom and dad on how to make that happen and when things can be fixed.
Yeah, exactly. And different people. It's interesting because maybe this has happened for you. It certainly happened for me. I've had certain views that I've held on to since I was young, but other views have evolved over time. And so as life has evolved, my views on certain things have evolved. And I think that there's an aspect of that's life. That's just human development. And so you might be on the same page with your brother, your cousin, or whoever you're doing business with right now, or you might have been on the same page 5 or 10 years ago, and you might no longer be on the same page. And that's the thing is it's much easier to solve these things while you're still on the same page than when one person gets further and further away from the page that you're on.
Yeah, it definitely is for sure. So what would be a key to success? I think most of the examples you're talking about was people like currently they start the business together and they're still going on. What are the keys to success for a transition? So that way it goes from generation 1 to generation 2. I think there's probably more opportunities for fight amongst siblings who didn't necessarily start it. So do you have any suggestions on how to make that, not turn into a big battle?
Yes, I think, look, firstly, if you're going to be transitioning from one generation to another, treat the interviews of the people you're going to be transitioning the leadership to as if they're actual interviews. Meaning, don't treat it like a nepo interview, and you just overlook all the critical skills that somebody would really need to make this business continue to be successful into the future. And I think that's very easy to do. I think we tend to be a lot more forgiving of those that are close to us than people who aren't, and we're willing to overlook a lot more things, including a lack of ability in certain areas when somebody's close to us. And I think that that's a critical mistake, because a lot of times what will happen then is you'll get people who maybe don't even care about the business or to be in that position, or maybe they do care, but they just have no ability to be actually able to be successful in that position. And all of those things can destroy a business from the inside.
Yeah. So, and then maybe to add on top of that, if you interview someone and you know that they want it and you think that they're going to be the right fit, but they're not there yet, then lay out a plan. Hey, in order for this to happen, I need to see X, Y, and Z. You're going to have to work in this division, do this time in here, do these qualifications. Then we can sit back and have another conversation about how that transition takes place. So it still comes back to that communication thing, like clarity, expectations. Here's what I need. Here's what you have to be able to do to make this happen. And then if they don't get it by X date, okay, well then that's off the table. And then we move on to, the next person.
Right. And I think there's an aspect of maybe just human nature that we tend to assume that other people naturally maybe know what we already know, or believe the things that we believe. And so many times, if you've got a business that's transitioning from first generation to second generation, and the first generation is the one that's built this business from the ground up, most of the time, that person or those people are going to know that business inside and out. They're going to know every division, every aspect of how things are done. And then you've got a second generation who may have been to the office a few times here and there, but they haven't spent any kind of substantial amount of time in the business. They don't necessarily understand the divisions or how money is made or any of the technical aspects of the business. And then you put them in charge and they don't really know what they're doing. Maybe they've got some insights into one area, but not all of them. And so I think that there's an aspect of just assuming that they know when they actually haven't been there, or that assuming that they know because they've occasionally been around, but they actually haven't had really any practical, meaningful experience to prepare them for it. So exactly what you're saying, Blake, having that plan to actually understand and assess where they're at and where they need to be to help continue making this business successful.
Yeah, the comparison to me, I mean, my poor kids, they definitely don't get the benefit of the doubt or getting treated early. I'm a coach, for most of their sports. I have a coaching background. So coach's kid is the one who gets reamed on the worst. Like, hey, you got to do this. You're picked apart so much more. So maybe that is, that's a little bit better from someone who's going to take it on. You're going to have to be treated under the pressure that you're expected to know a little bit more than necessarily just, oh yeah, no, you'll be fine. It's, you've been around, you'll be okay.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's great. I think it's interesting. I don't know what causes some kids to be more resilient than others. I don't know if it's nature or nurture or both and what percentage it is between the two. But as long as they're able to take that feedback and incorporate it without letting it break them down, I think that is invaluable. The ability to be able to take feedback, utilize it, make yourself better. It's such an incredible gift and ability.
Yeah. Part of that a lot of the time is communication as well from the parent or the other party. Hey, here is the expectation, and giving it to them, the critique in a way this is how you can get better versus you're terrible, don't ever try this again type of thing.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Although somehow, especially today, it seems like people are very loath to take any kind of harsh criticism or feedback relating to how they can improve. It's almost like an attack on their whole being, as opposed to just, hey, look, here's what I'm doing wrong. Here's what I can fix it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole rabbit hole we could go down with that. There's a lot of science on it. I have a guest coming up in future podcasts for our listeners. That's really going to be good. It's about resilience. And I'm excited for that podcast to come out soon or to record that here in I think it's next week, and then have it come out soon. So, that's my little teaser for staying on, because we can talk about that. Where do the fights happen in the second generation amongst siblings, or maybe, how can someone make sure that, a sibling who's not in the business, do they get ownership in it, or is it better for them to just get equal cash or value out of it? Like, how do you prevent the fight from the kid who's grown up, been, kind of tailored to take over that position, and then you have the other kid who had no interest in it, but they're still your kid, and you want to offset at least some value there. A big theme we talk about on the show is fair isn't always equal, and equal is not fair. But what are some things that you can think of that would help prevent fights that come along with that? Because I see that as a fight all the time.
I think it comes down to group dynamics and just having a group discussion around it, having an open and honest conversation around it as to what you're thinking if you're the person passing down the business, as to which sibling or siblings you're thinking about either giving control to or how you're planning on divvying it up. And also what the economics of that looks like. I mean, certainly if somebody's working in the business directly, either handling the day to day or the week to week or the month to month, they should get compensated more than a sibling who's not really involved and they're treating it passively. And then similarly, if you've got somebody who really isn't interested in the business at all, then they shouldn't have ownership in the business, because it's just going to destroy the business eventually, because that person's not going to be paying attention. We generally don't pay attention to things we don't care about. So that's probably not going to change. And by giving that person ownership, you're going to create friction not only internally with decision making, because now this person has an ownership percentage, but then also I think you're going to create friction with the people who are there doing the work. And then they're wondering why somebody got a percentage and they don't do anything. So you hurt yourself twice and you hurt the future generation twice. And so I think there's just an aspect of having a conversation about it and then making a decision and telling everybody that this is the decision that we've made and here's why. And maybe everybody agrees and maybe they don't. But I think that there's an aspect at least of feeling like the process was fair, even if the outcome doesn't necessarily feel fair or something that we agree with. I think that process feeling fair is incredibly important.
Yeah, and giving the kids an opportunity to have that discussion once again with mom and dad, as opposed to fighting out with their sibling who literally maybe didn't have any say in it. All of a sudden they just showed up, read the will, read the trust, like, oh, I get the business. Oh, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And there's nothing offset there. So it's amazing. The themes are so much about communication, and yet we don't talk about money. We don't necessarily talk about the business stuff. But the most successful businesses, the most successful families that transition those, they have those conversations, they educate their kids, they get them involved, and they figure those things out, as opposed to trying to keep it all close to the chest. But when you do that, if you just keep it close, no one knows what's going on, and it makes everyone's mind reading or trying to figure it out. So, that communication is definitely key.
Exactly. Be willing to have those hard conversations, because if you don't, it's just going to get harder.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. There's a lot of good insights for our business owner listeners out there. Before, the last few minutes, I want to talk about you personally. Kind of what's your vision of legacy? You have kids, or one and one on the way. What is the ideal legacy? What are the things that are important to you that you want to make sure are passed on to your kids?
Well, it's a great question. When it comes to what I'd like to see in terms of legacy with my kids, I mean, ultimately, I think I just want what everybody wants for their kids. I want them to be happy, healthy, and ideally successful at something they genuinely enjoy doing, and that they're of use to society. They contribute meaningfully to society, and they make an impact and help other people while they're here. And they find a calling that they genuinely enjoy, as opposed to just going to work because they feel like they have to, or to try to make a living. And when it comes to my work as a lawyer and a law firm owner and a business owner, I just hope I end up doing a lot of good for people, particularly with the people I'm working with and helping my clients, and that the people that work with me or for me all share a similar mindset. And we hire for that at my firm. And that I think it's just a good way to do business, is just trying to leave a positive impact, leave value for people, create value for people, and have fun while doing it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the way to try and get it done. So how do you plan on doing that with your kids, to helping them be contributing members of society, be successful, and do those things. Is there any kind of plan that you've talked about with your spouse? Is there things you've? I mean, I know they're young, so it's hard when they're they're young. You haven't had that, but any thoughts you have around how you're going to try and make that happen?
So right now, for example, we my daughter's 4, and I've got a little boy on the way. So at least with the daughter for now, what we try to do is we give her chores, things that she's got to do. She's got to put her toys away. She's responsible for her things. So if we're flying somewhere, she and I will have a conversation, and I ask her, Haley, who's in charge of your iPad? Haley, who's in charge of your headphones? And she'll say Haley. And so she makes sure that she puts it away in her backpack, and so she doesn't lose it. And she understands that if she loses it, even though luckily we're financially in a position to be able to replace it, it's not getting replaced. Certainly not for a long time, because I think there's an aspect of having a kid understand the consequences of doing things incorrectly or doing things wrong. That's really important. And I think it teaches them a sense of self-responsibility. So I think that's really all we're doing, is trying to provide some sort of guardrails and assistance and wisdom that they can think with, as opposed to trying to be super controlling about every little thing. I mean, just letting her make decisions. Sometimes we say no. For example, earlier this morning, she came to me and asked me, Daddy, can I eat this? And it was a Snickers bar she had from Halloween. And I'm like, baby, you can't eat the Snickers this morning. Yeah, you can pack it for your lunch if you want. It's your choice. But I can't have you eating just sugar and candy as your breakfast. And so she's a little disappointed, but she understood. So that was a little bit of a guardrail. But then I let her make the choice of she can choose if she wants it for her lunch or not. And so it's just a little example of a bigger idea, which is ultimately, I think that's what it is you just got to let them feel empowered to make good decisions and give them some guardrails to be able to learn what good decisions are.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely needs to be boundaries and things that you have to set up. But I loved the fact that you have a consequence. Hey, if you lose this, it's not coming back. Those are the moments that teach. Oh, shoot, I better make sure this doesn't, I don't lose this because I really like this iPad, And as they get older, you just add more responsibility on top of that. I think it's a great formula. And, I think for our listeners, a lot of times they think, oh, a 4-year-old can't have responsibilities. They absolutely can. Our kids continue to astound us if we give them the opportunity to.
And, I will say this, that on one of the flights that we were on together, I was watching my daughter. It was her and me on this flight, just us two. And there was a lady behind me, and her daughter was grown, and her daughter was now in college. And she's like, excuse me, I just wanted to tell you, I love that you did that. I did the same thing with my daughter when she was young, around her age, and it worked out really well. She's very responsible, gets her stuff done, and I think that had a big part in it. So I don't know. Yeah, time will tell if it worked out or didn't work out. Maybe we circle back in about 14 years when she's 18, and I'll confirm for you. But either way, I think that it teaches them something, and I think it is important.
Yeah, intentionality, doing what you can, and giving them responsibilities as early as you can. It doesn't have to be a lot, but you just slowly add to it so that they learn and they have that freedom and that agency to choose what they want. Well, yeah, thanks for being on the show. I've got one last question for you. What is the best advice you've ever been given? Doesn't necessarily have to be money related.
The best piece of advice is, as long as you believe and continue working on yourself, everything else is going to work out okay.
Okay, I like it. Yeah, bet on yourself, believe in yourself. Well, thank you again, Parag, for being on. I know you've got a book coming out, so tell the listeners where they can find that and where they can find you on socials or your website and all of that.
Yes, so I do have a book coming out. It's going to be called The Entrepreneur's Legal Playbook: Navigating the Pitfalls That Can Destroy Your Business. And I wrote the book to help business owners avoid the exact things that can destroy their business. Unfortunately, an example being what ruined my father's business. And the whole idea is a lot of entrepreneurs don't know what they don't know, and many times you can't avoid what you don't even know is there. And so that was the intention, is to have a book that people can have and use, and actually ideally avoid these exact problems. To learn more about it, you can just go to my website at www.paraglAmin.com. That's ParagLamin. So ParagLamin.com, which is my first name, middle initial, and last name. And we'll have more information about the book, along with a number of free resources for business owners.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes as well. Thank you again for being on the show, sharing your wisdom and insight to business disputes. I've definitely found it valuable for myself, and I know the listeners will also.
Yeah, my pleasure, Blake. Thank you.
Okay, and for our listeners, we'll catch you next time on Your Family Bank Podcast.